Okay na daw recording.
Good evening, everyone. So, before we proceed to our discussion, let us have our prayer first. Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Dear Father, we offer everything and thank you for everyone gathered here today to walk with you. May we ask you for your blessing and guidance so that the activities set for this undertaking be successful. We ask you to open our eyes to see the wonderful things from this activity. We ask that you to open our ears so that we may retain the invaluable knowledge. Open our minds for us to think wisely. Put us with understanding, cooperation, and peace in fulfilling our responsibilities. Open our hearts so that we may receive your everlasting love. And open our spirit so that we may know that you are with us all throughout the day. We ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Good evening again, everyone. So, our lesson tonight is about geographic, linguistic, and ethnic dimensions of Philippine literary history from pre-colonial to the contemporary. For the objective at the end, at the end of the lesson, the learners are expected to identify geographic, linguistic, and ethnic dimensions of Philippine literary history from pre-colonial to contemporary, and representative text from the regions. To properly start our discussion, let us have our motivation. Watch and listen carefully as you will have a processing questions after the video.
The Philippines, officially the Republic of the Philippines, is an archipelago situated in Southeast Asia in the Western Pacific Ocean. It consists of about 7,641 islands that are broadly categorized under three main geographical divisions from north to south: Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. People have lived in the Philippines since the dawn of human history. Originally, the various islands were populated by competing tribes, each with their own king or queen. In 1521, the explorer Ferdinand Magellan claimed the islands for Spain, and colonization began in 1565. Spanish rule brought Catholicism to the area, with missionaries establishing churches, schools, hospitals, universities, and largely displacing the previously entrenched Hindu, Islamic, and Buddhist faiths. The Philippines was under Spanish rule for 300 years. It lasted until the Philippine Revolution in 1898. American settlement in the Philippines began during the Spanish colonial period. The period of American colonization of the Philippines lasted 48 years, from cession of the Philippines to the U.S. by Spain in 1898 to U.S. recognition of the Philippine independence in 1946. The setup of bicameral government and introduction of the education system took place during the American period. The Japanese occupation of the Philippines occurred between 1942 and 1945, when Imperial Japan occupied the Commonwealth of the Philippines during World War II. The invasion of the Philippines started on the 8th of December 1941, 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Japan occupied the Philippines for over 3 years. The Philippines population hit 110 million in 2020. It is the 13th most populous country in the world. The Philippines proudly boasts to be the only Christian nation in Asia. More than 86% of the population is Roman Catholic, 6% belong to various nationalized Christian cults, and another 2% belong to well over 100 Protestant denominations. In addition to the Christian majority, there is a vigorous 4% Muslim minority, concentrated on the southern islands of Mindanao, Sulu, and Palawan. The Philippines has over 180 languages and dialects. The official languages are Filipino and English. The Philippines has two distinct seasons, wet and dry. The dry season starts from November until June. These months are considered as the best time to travel to most destinations in the Philippines. The wet season, on the other hand, is from July to October. During this time, an average of 9 typhoons hit the Philippines and may cause flooding and landslides in some areas. While not all typhoons make landfall, heavy rains may still affect your trip, so make sure you check weather forecasts. Filipino cuisine is very complex, influenced by the country's former colonizers and its neighboring Asian countries. Because of this, Filipino food has been shaped by the Chinese, Spaniards, Indians, Japanese, and a whole plethora of Western influences. What is it about the Philippines that makes it different from the rest of the world? Well, for one thing, it is all about their culture. Filipinos are very resilient. In times of calamities and catastrophes, Filipinos always manage to rise above the challenge. Instead of wallowing, they manage to pick themselves up and smile. Filipinos take pride of their families. In the Philippines, it is family first. So whether you are part of the immediate family or you belong to the third or fourth generation, you are treated as a family member. Sometimes, even the closest of friends are considered family too. Filipinos are very religious. In all corners of a Filipino house, you can find brazen images of crosses and other religious paraphernalia. They go to church every Sunday, or sometimes even twice or 3 times a week. Filipinos are very respectful. From the moment they were born into this world, they are already taught how to be respectful by using these simple phrases, po and opo, words that end sentences when addressing elders. They have a culture of mano, which is where they raise their backs of the hands of the elders to their foreheads as a sign of respect. Filipinos help one another. More popularly known as bayanihan, Filipinos help one another without expecting anything in return, so that undertaking their tasks and responsibilities become much easier. Sometimes this is called community spirit. Filipinos value traditions and culture. For Filipinos, traditions in their home and in their family are important. They usually set aside a specific day for a certain celebration, like festivals, birthday parties, reunions, etc. And of course, every gathering is dedicated to keeping up with each other over sumptuous food. From pristine beaches and marvelous natural wonders to interesting historic sites and once-in-a-lifetime experiences, the Philippines pack many exciting things to see and do. Here are some of the must-visit tourist spots in the Philippines. Boracay Island, Palawan, Siargao Island, Chocolate Hills, Puerto Princesa Underground River, Mayon Volcano, Banawe Rice Terraces, Batanes. Truly, the Philippines is one of the most diverse and fastest growing countries in the region. The country isn't just about its beautiful beaches and islands. It's also about culture, history, natural landscape, and most importantly, people.
Now let's go to the processing questions. Let us first answer the what is the video all about? Anyone? Okay, if none, so I'll be answering the question number one. So it is about the history and culture of the Philippines before the colonialism. We had tribes, which led by Datus. So it discusses colonialism in the Philippines and how we attained the independence that we are so desperately desired because we were oppressed at that time. So we were always the subject to harsh and mistreatment under the colonizers. The video also presented the richness of the Philippines in terms of the food, culture, and land masses. So we have the answer in chat box. Okay, for Arturo, the video is all about the history and culture of the Philippines. So, very good. Thank you for that. Next, let us answer the second question. What are the two distinct seasons in the Philippines? Anyone? Okay, Realin, you may proceed.
The two distinct seasons in the Philippines are wet and dry season.
Okay, thank you. Very good. That is correct. So the dry season starts from November until the June, and whereas the wet season starts from July to October. That is according to the video that is presented a moment ago. Third one, let us answer the third question. How did these former colonizers shape us in our history? Anyone? Okay, if none, I'll proceed to the answer. So, the colonial governments invested in different infrastructures and trades like medical and technological knowledge. In some cases, the colonizer encouraged literacy, the adaptation of human rights standards, and the system of democratic system in the government. However, coercion and forced assimilation impose their own culture values, religions, and laws which do not favor. Okay, again, so however, coercion in that era and forced assimilation were rampant. That is imposed by the colonizer. They imposed by force their cultural values, religions, and laws, which do not favor to the people. So it changed the culture, traditions, our language, the writings, and things that our ancestors used to do before, like rituals. That is very common in the Philippines before. Next is okay. So for the refreshment, let us answer this question. What is literature? Anyone? Okay, if none, I'll be answering the question. So, literature from Latin, litera, meaning letters, and referring to an acquaintance with the written word. In short, it is the body of written works. Now, let us define what is literature. Can someone read the definition of literature? Okay, Rielin, you may read the definition.
Literature is a written work of specific culture, subculture, religion, philosophy, or the study of such written work, which may appear in poetry or in prose.
Okay, thank you for your effort. So even before, our forefathers already had their culture, which reflected in different traditions and customs. So they had their own alphabet, but unfortunately, the Spanish friars burned their alphabet in the belief that these alphabets were works of devil or written on materials that quickly perish, such as the bark of trees, dried leaves, and bamboo cylinders. So, our unique geographic linguistic is the reason why the Philippines is rich in terms of culture, food, and land masses. Now let us proceed to the pre-Spanish period. Can someone read the first bullet? Okay, you may proceed, Jaime.
Chant or bulong. This was used in witchcraft or enchantment, especially in remote places in the Visayas.
Okay, thank you. So the example of witchcraft or enchantment in the Visayas is hulam, barang, and saying the phrase tabi-tabi po, makikiraan lang po. That is commonly used in Visayas. Most commonly in Samar and parts of the Visayas. Next is the legends. Can someone read the definition of legends? Okay, Claire, you may read the definition of legends.
Legends. These are genres of folklore that consist of a narrative featuring human actions, perceived or believed both by teller and listeners to have taken place within human history.
So, this may include supernatural beings, elements of mythology, or explanation of natural phenomena, or the belief of gnome, or duende, or manananggal, or the tikbalang. That is part of the legends. Next is the folktales. Can someone read the definitions of folktales? Okay, Claire, you may read.
Folk tales. These are made up of stories about life, adventure, love, horror, and humor where one can derive lessons.
So the example of this is the moon and the sun. So have you heard or read the story of the moon and the sun? Okay, that I will take that. No. So the story, okay, no. Okay, so the story of the moon and the sun is about their wedlock, which they had many children who were the stars. So the sun was very fond of his children, but whenever he tried to embrace each of them, he burned them up because he was so hot. That is the story of the sun and the moon. Next is we are still in a pre-Spanish period. Who can read the first bullet? Okay, Jaime, you may proceed now.
Epics. These are long narrative poems in which a series of heroic achievements or events, usually of a hero, are dealt with at length.
So the example of prime epic is the story of Biag ni Lamang or Life of Lamang. So Lamang was born during the war. So his tribe was forced to flee their lands by their enemies. When Lamang was fully grown, he defeated the leader of their enemies on his own. So that is the story of life of Lamang. Next is the folk song. So, uh, folk songs, these are one of the oldest forms of the Philippine literature that emerged in the pre-Spanish period. These songs mirrored the early forms of culture. Many of these have 12 syllables. So, the famous example of this is the Kundiman by Francisco Santiago and Kumintang or Tagumpay by Francisco Buencamino. Next is the Spanish period. So in the Spanish period, in this era, literature may be classified as a religious prose and poetry, and few were not inclined in religious or have no spiritual basis in prose or in poetry. Also, in this era, the teaching of the Christian doctrine became the basis of religious practices. So, who can read the first bullet? Okay, Milea, you can read the first bullet.
Spanish influences on Philippine literature. The first Filipino alphabet, called Alibata, was replaced by the Roman alphabet.
So in this first bullet, I think the correct term is baybayin, not alibata, because alibata refers to the Arabic alphabet and the baybayin refers to the Filipino alphabet. Next bullet. Can someone read the folk songs? Okay, Claire.
Folk songs. It manifests the artistic feelings of the Filipinos and shows their innate appreciation for and love of beauty.
So the example of folk song is the well famous Leron Leron Sinta. So Leron Leron Sinta, buko ng papaya, dala dalay buslo, sisidlan ng sinta. So that is the first lyric in the song Leron Leron Sinta. I means folk songs. So and then we have the Dandansoy that came from the Visayan folk song which goes Dandansoy bayaan taika. So, Dandansoy came from the Visayan folk song, which was about a woman who left her lover. However, she gave him a chance to be with her if he can prove his undying love to her. Next, we have the recreational place. So, in recreational place, were many recreational plays performed by the Filipinos during the Spanish time. So for the example, these are the Sinakulo, Salubong, and Zarzuela, if you are familiar to that, wherein it is poetic and it describes various Catholic liturgic feasts. Next is the period of enlightenment. Can someone read the definition of period of enlightenment and the propaganda movement? Okay, Rialin.
Period of Enlightenment, 1872 to 1898. In the 19th century, Filipino intellectuals educated in Europe called Ilustrados began to write about the hitch of colonization, the propaganda movement, Rizal's writings, Del Pilar's writings, and Haina's writings.
So among these Filipino intellectuals educated in Europe, specifically in Spain, are Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, Graciano Lopez, Jaina Antonio Luna, Mariano Ponce, Jose Maria Panganiban, and Pedro Paterno. So how these people able to fly into Europe because these people were middle class Filipinos. So they are known as ilustrados, but the three, specifically Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Jaina, are also known as triumvirate of Filipino propagandists, wherein Graciano Lopez Jaina was first to arrive in Spain and began the propaganda movement, which advocated to reform against the Spanish colony and eventually led to the arm of the Philippine Revolution that began in Manila in 1896. So these triumvirate Filipino propagandists saw this as a step towards the Philippine national identity. So here is the writings of Rizals and Marcelo H. Del Pilar and Graciano Lopez Jaina. Now let's go to American regime. Can someone read the first, the definition of American regime? Okay, Claire.
The American regime. Linguistically, Americans influenced Filipino writers to write using the English language. Jose Garcia Villa became famous for his free verse. Characteristics of literature
Okay.
during this period. Sorry po.
Okay, so the characteristics of literature during this period, thank you, Claire. The languages used in writing were Spanish and Tagalog, and the dialects of the different regions. So, however, the writers in Tagalog continued in their lamentation in the condition that the country and their attempt to arouse love for one's native tongue. And writers in English imitated the themes and methods of Americans in terms of writing. Now let's go to the Japanese period. So Japan conquered the Philippines between 1941 to 1945. Philippine literature in English came to an halt. So, however, the Philippine literature was interrupted in and its development when the Japanese occupation began. So the Philippine literature in English was stopped. So the Filipino poetry during this period, the common theme that mostly writes by the Filipino was about nationalism, country, love, and life in the barrios, faith and religion, and also the arts. In this era, three types of poems emerge. So these are the haiku, which is three verse poems that Japanese really liked. It was made up 17 syllables divided into three lines. And we have tanaga, which is somehow related to haiku, but it has a measure and rhyme. And for the last, the karaniwang anyo or usual form. Now let's go to the Philippine literature in English. Can someone read the definition? Okay, Claire.
Philippine literature in English. Because of the strict prohibitions imposed by the Japanese in the writing and publishing of works in English, Philippine literature in English experienced a dark period.
Okay, thank you. So for the first 20 years, many books in this era were published both in English and in Filipino. And the Philippine literature in Tagalog was also revived. So most themes in the writings dealt with Japanese brutalities, poverty of life under the Japanese government, and also the brave guerrilla exploits. Now let's go to the rebirth of freedom. So here, the early post-liberation period was marked by a kind of struggle of mind and spirit, caused by the sudden emancipation from the enemy and the wild desire to see the prince. So in this era, um, the freedom or the independence that we desired that we desperately desired have um, okay, next, rebirth of freedom. So here, the literary writing is very popular in terms of vernacular. So the writers had a better knowledge of their craft and enjoyed political activism. The example of this is the poetry. When I See a Barong Barong by Maximo Ramos, and a short story, Plighted Word by Narciso G. Reyes, and Scent of Apples by Bienvenido Santos. Next is the period of activism. So here, according to Posano Pineda, youth activism during 1970 to 1972 was due to domestic and worldwide causes. Because of the ills of the society, the youth moved to seek reforms. So the literary revolution, the youth became vocal with their sentiments. So the youth demanded a change in the government, and it was manifested in the bloody demonstrations and the sidewalk expressions, and also in literature. Now let's go to the period of new society. Can someone read the definition of period of new society? Okay, Jaime.
Period of the New Society. The period of the New Society started on September 21, 1972. The Carlos Palanca Awards continued to give annual awards. Poems dealt with patience, regard for native culture, customs, and the beauties of nature and surroundings. Newspapers donned new forms.
Okay, thank you. So here, in this era, the more focus of the Filipinos was about news on economic progress, discipline, culture, tourism, and Filipinos were favored more than the sensationalized reportings of killings, rapes, and robberies. So in this era, Filipinos were very hooked on reading magazines and comics more than reading or listening to the information that was more important in magazine and comics. Next is the period of the Third Republic. So in this era, former President Ferdinand Marcos called it the New Republic of the Philippines. So can someone read the definition of period of the Third Republic? Okay, Claire.
Period of the Third Republic. After 10 years of military rule and some changes in the life of the Filipino, which started under the new society, martial rule was at last lifted on January 2, 1981. Poems during this period of the Third Republic were romantic and revolutionary. Many Filipino songs dealt with themes that were true to life, like those of grief, poverty, aspirations for freedom, love of God, of country, and fellow men.
Okay, thank you. So let's proceed to the next slide. So can someone read the definition of post-EDSA 1 revolution? Okay, Milea.
Post-EDSA One Revolution, Filipino people regained their independence which they lost 20 years ago. In 4 days from February 21 to 25, 1986, the so-called people power Lakas ng Bayan prevailed. In the short span of the existence of the real Republic of the Philippines, several changes already became evident.
Okay, thank you. So in this era, Marcoses were ousted from the power and landed in Hawaii the day of their exile. And the Filipinos won against the dictatorship. Next, we have the 21st century period. So here, 21st century learners are demanded to be information and communication technology inclined to compete with the style and format of writing as well. So new codes and lingos are used to add flavor in the literary pieces produced nowadays. So in this era, 21st century learners are said to be technological savvy, wherein they have the right skills and intuitive knowledge to operate modern devices effectively, as well as to understand the technical concepts. So, do you have any questions, clarification before we proceed to our activity?
None po.
Okay, thank you for the response. Let us proceed to the activity. Okay, thank you, Rialyn. For this activity, I'll be giving you 5 minutes to finish the activity for the direction. Identify which literary period in the Philippine literature each situation happened. So you may start answering now. Sorry for the interruption. You may continue answering. Okay, let us proceed answering these activity. So for number one, read first before answering. Who may read the number one? So, okay, Jaime, you may answer the number one.
Number one, religious and secular prose and poetry were introduced. The answer is Spanish period.
Okay, that is correct. So for number two, let us have realin.
Right about the of colonization. The answer is period of enlightenment.
That is correct. So for number three, let us have Milea.
Literary writing in vernacular became popular. The birth of freedom.
Okay, that is correct. For number four, for number five, who may answer for number five? Oh, I think we are in number four. Okay, for number four, let us have, okay, Arturo. Okay, for Arturo, for number four, it is period of the Third Republic. Okay, correct. So for number five, let us have Realin for number five.
The literary revolution. The answer is period of activism.
Okay, that is also correct. For number six, let us have Rodriguez.
Reflection of the ancestors' way of life. The answer is pre Spanish period.
So for number seven, haiku, tanaga, and karaniwang anyo emerged during this period. The answer is the Japanese period. Okay, thank you, Arturo. That is correct. For number eight, let us have Realin for number eight.
The Filipino people regained their independence. American regime.
Okay, that is correct. So for number 9, we can have Milea for number 9.
New codes and lingos are used to add flavor to the literary pieces. 21st century period.
Okay, that is correct. So for number 10, we have Ramos.
Jose Garcia Villa became famous for his free verses. The answer is the American Regi.
Okay, thank you. So how was your score? How was your score, guys? Who got perfect 10? Okay, 9. That is excellent. 9 for Arturo. That is excellent. So thank you. So let us now proceed to the activity 2. So for the activity 2, it is one of the famous song during the post EDSA 1. So entitled Ang Bayan Ko by Freddie Aguilar. So you will analyze and interpret the emotions of Filipinos and situations of the country found in each paragraph of the song. So let me play this song first.
Ang bayan kong Pilipinas, lupain ng ginto't bulaklak, pag-ibig na sa kanyang pangalan, ng alay na ganda diwa, at sa kanyang yumi at ganda, dayuhan ay naatila. Bayan ko, binihag ka, nasadlak sa dusa. Ibon mang may layang lumipad, kulungin mo at umiiyak. Bayan pa kayang sakdal nila, ang di magnasang makaalpas. Pilipinas kong minumutya, bukad ng luha at dalita, aking adwika, makita kang sakdal laya.
Okay, so for this activity, I'll be giving you 5 minutes to analyze the song and interpret the emotions. You may start answering now. I think we can now proceed to answering this activity. So, what do you think is the emotion and situation um, our country face in the song? Okay, Ramos.
I think this song shows the pride that Filipinos have felt, and as this song refers to nationalism and loyalty to our country. That's all po.
Okay, thank you. So, in this song, it is about the difficulties faced by many Filipinos during the Marcos regime. So it is under the dictatorship, wherein most people experience harsh treatment and abuses in his military. So and now during this post EDSA one, the Filipinos regain the independence, and it was seen on the faces of many Filipinos and peace in our environment. So the motherland regain the freedom that the people were so desperately desired during this era. Now let us proceed to the next slide. So, okay, for your post test, it was already uploaded in your Google Classroom. You can access the post test through your Google account. So don't forget to turn in your work once you are done because I'll be checking that after the discussions. So for the direction, choose the letter of the best answer. I'll be giving you 10 minutes, so you may start answering now. Okay, I see that all of you have turned in your work. Let us now proceed to the application, which also will serve as your assignment. So for the directions, create a free verse poem with 7 stanzas about what you have learned in the literary timeline of the Philippines and how it affects you as a 21st century learner. Share it with your classmates through spoken poetry. Refer to the rubrics on the next slide. So here is the rubrics that you'll be following in order for you to create a well-formed poem. Okay, so next slide. For the reflection, that will also serve as your assignment. For the direction, read the following questions carefully and briefly explain your answer. State your answer in 5 to 10 sentences. So you'll be passing your 2 assignments next meeting, that is Tuesday. Okay, so these are the references used in this discussion. Thank you for listening and for your participation.
Thank you,
You may
sir.
leave the meeting now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you din po.
May magpe-present ka na ba?
Aba, di ko alam. Si Ticlair na. Nasaan na si Ticlair?
Thank you, Arturo. Thank you,
thank you,
Jaime. Thank you, Riri. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Milea.
Mila,
Congrats.
ikaw muna.
Ikaw
Hoy,
muna.
anong thank you? Kapal mo.
Te, ikaw muna, te.
Wait lang, stop
Ha?
recording ko lang.